Welcome back to another tech tip video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to export Teams data and chats out of Office 365. Now, I work on the legal side of things, and people who are on IT side ask me a question. How do I take Teams or chat data, export it out, and give it to legal team for further review by attorneys? In this video, I'm going to cover just that. So I made a PowerPoint with screenshots of the process. Now, the reason why I'm not using the actual live data is because each step takes a long time, and I wanted to shortcut some of these things and just bring you the highlights of the process. I'm going to share my screen and show you what we have. All right, Microsoft Office 365, exporting data. So what we're going to cover is exporting Teams data as PST, exporting chat data as PST, and then we're going to export chat data again as HTML, and I'll explain what the different things are and why we need different formats. All right, quick disclaimer, I'm not an expert on this, I'm just a user. I logged into Office 365 and I figured out how to use things. I'm not certified in any way. This is just my experience in using the tool, so just be warned. All right, in eDiscovery, we have three options. We have we call standard, premium, and user data search. Now, we're going to talk about standard and premium. We are not going to work with user data search, and mostly because I had bad experience there. User data search is a little weird how it works, and whenever I've been querying for data, I've been getting very inconsistent results. And in my opinion, standard actually works better than content search, and it's pretty much the same thing. So what you really need is just either standard or premium. So let's start with exporting Teams using eDiscovery standard. Now, Teams and chats are different, and Teams are indicated by this icon team, which is where groups of people can collaborate on specific topic. Chats, on the other hand, is different. This is where people either have group chats or talk to each other one-on-one. So they're completely different types of data, and it's important to realize that. So in this part, we are working with Teams data. We're going to go to eDiscovery standard, and we're going to do all the boring stuff. We're going to create a case. We're going to name the case. And we are going to be greeted with number of tabs here: home, searches, hold, export, settings. And we'll navigate to searches, and we're going to create a new search. And of course, we're going to give it a name. Now we get into the good part, and it is the location. So when you want to export a team, you need to select a mailbox and a SharePoint site. So data for team exists in two different places. There is a dedicated mailbox on Exchange server that contains messages as well as images that have been posted inside of the team. There is also a SharePoint site that contains attachments that users have included. So what you're going to do is turn on both status on, and in included, you're going to choose a user, group, or team. So you will select a mailbox that is named per the team you want to export. And then you will also find a SharePoint site that will have a same name. So you have to make sure both are selected. If you do not select SharePoint site, you will not get attachments exported. So this is very important. And once you have that, you can review your search, click submit. Office 365 will generate the export that will give you information about how many gigabytes of data and so on. And then you can just say export results. The only option here that I think is important is to include all items. Microsoft, for some reason, wants to exclude unrecognized format items. Being on litigation, we want everything, so you never want to exclude something unless it's like a system file that's listed in the NIST database or something like that. So you want to make sure you have everything included. So we're going to do all items. And everything else is kind of fine. You can do one PST per mailbox. I don't know about the duplication. I don't have enough experience with that. Versions for SharePoint, you can export. What happens is when users modify files inside the SharePoint, it gets saved over and over again. It basically overwrites each other, but Microsoft keeps track of it in the backend, so you can export multiple versions, even though I don't think you can associate them to the individual messages when they were sent. That would be very difficult, maybe impossible. And then whether you want to zip it up or not. So if it's, it's up to you. And once you do that, the export will start. Now, one interesting thing that happens is this download results button shows up before the data is ready to download or the data is prepared. So you might be thinking like, oh, the download results button suddenly popped up. I can click on it and download. No, you have to wait until prepare data completes. It's kind of misleading. It might be like lower and you have to scroll to it. But this really shouldn't pop up until your data is ready. I don't know why I do that. And if you try to download it, it's going to error out. Makes no sense. And then once you have your data finished preparing, then you can click on download results. It'll come up with a little download utility. You will copy your specific key and then download folder, and it will all be downloaded. So what are some of the problems associated here? Well, the first problem is we've downloaded SharePoint data and Teams data separately. They're two separate exports. They go to two separate folders. And in the message, you don't have attachments physically attached to a file. They are referenced by URL link, and that data is located in the SharePoint folder that you have exported out. So there is a URL link to programmatically connect things together. However, that URL link on occasion contains %20, which replaces the space character. And it does that inconsistently. Sometimes it does that, sometimes it may not. Sometimes it may do it for some of the documents, but not all the time. So this is something to keep an eye on, and this is something that may come up when you're trying to reconnect things together. And if you need to, you may have to do search and replace or any kind of fixing. The second problem I've seen is Office 365 exports corrupt PSTs. It just happens. It's a thing. All you do is you try it again at a later time. Right? You just re-export, rerun your search, whatever number of steps you have to go before and try it. Do not repair PSTs. Repairing PSTs is always a bad practice. You never, ever, ever want to repair PSTs. You always want to re-export your data again. But those are the two problems I've observed using this. So a couple of notes. This data gets exported in a PST format, which you can open using Outlook. So you can open it and preview your data. I suggest making a backup copy of the PST file before you go in there and start poking at it, because it's a live database and you can change something. You can change the red status or move something accidentally. Next thing is native files are exported to a separate folder. Again, it's a major inconvenience, and it's not going to be easy to review. And because of that, data needs to be loaded into a system that understands this file format. This data is not ready to be handed to an end user and say, go ahead, Mr. Attorney, review this data. This data is not ready for that. It needs to be loaded into some kind of litigation system that knows how to accept this. Generally speaking, once you're at this point, you can hand this data over to an e-discovery vendor and they should be able to work with it. All right, so let's now move to the next export, and it's going to be exporting chats using e-discovery standard export. So chats are different than Teams. This is where people get together in group and just have a chat conversation, maybe one-on-one or groups. So that data resides in different area of exchange. And so when we export that, I'm going to skip all the repetitive stuff. What we're going to do now is we're going to select an Exchange mailbox, and we're going to choose a user's mailbox, right? So the chat data is stored in each person's mailbox, and attachments are stored on OneDrive. However, using this tool, we cannot export attachments. Even though right here in the bottom it says OneDrive sites, you can try to turn this on, but you would not be able to locate a SharePoint or OneDrive site where attachments are stored. So in this export, we are going to be missing attachments that are like Word and Excel files. But the pictures like JPEGs, screenshots are still going to be there. All right, so we've selected our user that we want to export. And now in the conditions section, we want to select type and make sure we specify instant message. Right? If we don't do that, we're going to get all kinds of other documents. This video is specific to chat or short message communication data. So we're going to do condition builder and instant message. This way, the export will scan through the user's mailbox and only pull out instant messages. And then the process is the same. You will go to your export and it's generated and you export it to file. So what are some of the problems with this export? And of course, number one is we are missing attachments, right? They will not be exported. What you can do is you can go to user's individual OneDrive and manually collect that. And that will contain all the attachments that were sent. I've seen corrupt PSTs again, and I've seen a red status of a message being incorrect. I've collected my own data. I know I've read all the messages. They're marked as read on my Teams or in my chat. However, in a PST, it shows up as I have number of messages that I haven't read. So that's sort of a red flag, but that's what it does. All right, and some of the additional notes is this is a PST format. Like before, we can go in, poke around, look at it, get a preview. But ultimately, we need to load this data into some kind of legal system for document review. So at this point, you might be asking, well, not having attachments is actually pretty bad. Is there a way to export chat data with attachments? And yes, there is. We'll need to use eDiscovery Premium, and the export format is going to be in HTML. Unfortunately, that's the only way to do it. So let's go through the process on how to do that. Again, we're working with chat data. And we're going to navigate to eDiscovery Premium. We're going to do all the boring stuff we did before. We're going to create a case. We're going to give a case a name. We're going to choose a format, and I'm going to talk about only the new format. The classic one is going to be deprecated, so there is no point of discussing that. Once we create our case, we need to add a data source. So we're going to add our custodian. And once we have our custodian added, one thing I do is I turn off legal hold. I don't know if you need to do it or not, but when I was doing my exports, it was a one-time export. I didn't have to put the data on hold. I just need to get it out. So I just uncheck the hold. And then once you have a data source created, we're going to create a collection. And this collection, again, we're going to give it a name. And collection is going to be based on a data source. So I know it's confusing, but we define a source with custodians we're going to be collecting. And then we can have separate data sources, either pointing to each custodian or some other way. But what we're going to do here is same filtering as we did before. Since we're pulling from personal mailbox, we need to filter out for instant messages. And that's what we're going to do in our conditions section. So make sure that's checked. Now you have an option to get collection estimate. So if you expect a lot of data, you can select that option and then you can see how many gigabytes you're going to get. Just, maybe if you're thinking that you need to split data into multiple sets so you can export everything at the same time. Usually I do one custodian at a time because I have small data sets. So that's not an issue. So what I'm going to do is push this right into a review set. Now, ideally, you want to push this into export, but you really can't do that. You have to take this data, put it into review set, and from review set, you have to export. So I'm just going to say, all right, collect items and add to review set, give it a name, and now you're going to be waiting. So this part may take really long time, and if you look at your collection, it's going to say add into review set, and it's going to have the criteria, and data will be added to this review set you see below. Again, there's nothing here. You're just going to be sitting there and waiting. In my experience, like just 4 gigs of data could take good number of hours, 4 or 5 hours. I had to take overnight sometimes, so it depends how the system feels that day. But once data is ready and it is in the review set, you don't actually have to do anything with the review set except open it and say action export, and then just say all documents in review set. And there is really no point of the review set because we're not doing the review. We're just putting it there temporarily, and we're going to be pushing it right into the export. So we'll say all documents, and there's some other options, condensed directory structure, all that is fine. And now we're going to be waiting for the export to be created. It's going to take a little bit of time as usual, and then you're going to get your export that says here is your summary and here is your zip file. Even though the download button is highlighted, if you click on it, nothing will happen. You have to check the files you want to download, so it's kind of weird, but again, one of those weird quirks. So if you click on download and nothing's happening, well, because you didn't select the file. And that's it, you'll download your file. So some of the notes here, be ready to wait. This is a much slower process than the regular e-discovery, and there's more waiting between different steps. So if someone says, we need this data right away, like, no, that's not happening. This is gonna take, at least a day, maybe we're looking into multiple day process. This export will be in HTML format. Means you'll be able to use like a web browser to open it and look at it. But ultimately, same rules apply. You need to load this data into a system that understands this data format. There may be errors present, and that's something that I've noticed. That there is a report that's going to come out, and the file format that Microsoft generates, the HTML, does contain a few bugs and issues. I will try to link a video where I talk about that. There are JSON files that are embedded inside HTML, and there's some improper formatting. So this file format is not as good as PST. PST gives you more metadata inside and better information. This feels like it needs a little bit more work by Microsoft. So this is the errors that I've seen. Items skipped. Usually they were either folders or some kind of system items. So not a big deal, but you do want to check the error log to make sure you're not missing any data. So what can you do with your data overall, right? So when you have all these exports, PST, HTML, so we can preview it. We can either use Outlook or web browser to open either PST or HTML. Again, you want to be careful that you don't modify your data, which is especially important for PST because it's a live database. If you go in there and accidentally drag something, you're going to modify it and it's going to be overwritten in the PST right away. What you really should do with this data is send it to your e-discovery service provider, whoever you're working with, either your legal team or someone else who knows how to take this export and put it into something that could be used by attorneys. Because again, the data as it's exported is not very usable. Now, if you're on more adventurous side and you want to convert this data to format that's supported by like Relativity or something like that, there is an application that I sell on my website called Message Crawler. It will read those exports and it will convert it to something like this, which is going to be a DAT file or an Excel format where all the messages and attachments will be listed, and from here you can do exports into numerous file formats. Again, this is best handled by your legal team, but if you want to try that, this is the application that can handle that. All right, and that's it. Thank you for watching this. I know this is a complicated topic. The exports are complicated. Working with data is even more complicated, and having Microsoft throw in a few quirks and bugs here and there makes it even more exciting. If you do have any questions or you need help, you can contact me on my website, #legal.com. I can try to answer some of the questions. and hopefully work with you to get your data converted, especially if you look into purchase message crawler to convert your data. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you on another.